Great. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining this today. I'm excited for this meeting. This is our first Vaughn customer show and tell meeting. We're going to be doing these honestly as frequently as I can get them scheduled. Our next one is already scheduled, and I'll share the link later on today in the chat. It's going to be by Steve Teresi, who's here. Thank you, Steve. He's got some cool things to share and show. I mean to show and tell. So today is Chris Wright from Datagrail. We are recording this, so I'll send this out to everybody after. You can share it within your teams as well. As you can see, this is just a Zoom meeting. I chose not to use our webinar platform for this because I did want this to be a little bit more of a way for Bond customers to talk and interact with each other and ask questions. I know, Chris, you also said that you were comfortable with that. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Chris. You can take it away. I'm going to put myself on mute so you don't hear noise going on around me. But everyone, please feel free. Ask questions, come off mute. I'll keep an eye on the chat if you're too shy. Ask your question in the chat and I'll make sure that Chris sees it as he's presenting. Over to you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Cool. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today and appreciate the invite, Sarah. I'm super excited to present. So quick intro, I'm the VP of Go-to-Market Ops, Growth, and AI at Datagrail. And so my promise, I guess, for the next 45 minutes is I'm not going to focus on telling you what Vaughn can do. Everyone here has obviously already bought the solution, so no one needs to see the demo again. What I'm going to focus on is to show you what happened when we stopped using Vaughn like a tool and started running our company on it, right? So revenue, retention, team capacity, what our leadership reads every morning, the whole operating rhythm, and just a couple of things that we got wrong along the way, because those are also very useful as well. And as Sarah mentioned, I'm definitely happy to have this be interactive. So if you want to interject or ask any questions, please do so. So just like a quick alignment again. So this is not going to be a product pitch, right? So you guys own the product. It isn't a highlight reel either, right? So you're going to hear the numbers that we were embarrassed to measure, the things we'd like to skip if we started over again. And it isn't a locked playbook, right? Every single workflow that I show today is one that you could rebuild next week. Most of these were built in under an hour. That's the whole point of showing these things. And so what we really want to focus on is the 5 design principles that held up no matter which use case we built. These are live deployed evidence underneath each one of them, shown, not described, all in plain English. If a slide needed a glossary, it didn't make the deck. And I just wanted to index on the right, on the very bottom statement here, which is I'm not the right person to tell you what the product does. I'm the right person to tell you what we learned from building on top of it. Cool. So before principles, the proof. So here's what the operating system actually produced for us in the last quarter. There's 4 core numbers, and the big one first, about 350,000 of new quarterly revenue directly attributed to Vaughn workflows and the propensity models that we run underneath, which is a pretty sizable, meaningful share of our revenue. The amber bars next to it are the honest visuals of that baseline keeps rising. And I can tell you that this quarter will definitely probably exceed what we achieved last quarter. And I want to be very clear that I'm choosing the word attribution carefully here. This is not influence, not touched. These are opportunities and engagements that occurred via like Vaughn triggered workflows that sourced and materially advanced these solutions or opportunities that led to these outcomes. Second, CSM teams went from partially managing, let's call it 30 or so accounts effectively, to being able to manage 50 plus accounts. Same team, same 40 hours. Nobody worked faster. I'll show you exactly what we augmented in their workflows to achieve this. And third is the confession. We used to miss, I'd say probably like 22, 23% of the spoken customer follow-ups and meetings, whether that was customer meetings or AE engagements. And that has dropped down significantly to sub 1%, which is awesome. And then actually, sorry, the last metric here is the 5 to 7 minutes from buying signal to personalized outreach. Hold on to that one, because that's like the heart of our principle 3 that we'll talk about. And the line underneath it all, every workflow behind these numbers took, like I said, under about 45 minutes to build, not quarters, just minutes. So the speed isn't the bragging right. It's actually one of the core principles. Cool. So let's have an honest starting point. And I would say this with love because that's what it is. But most teams use these reasoning engines like a search bar, right? So if you look at the left side, you ask a question: how much pipeline do we have this quarter? An answer comes back to you. A human reads it, then decides, and then acts, and then everything just kind of waits, right? Waits to be asked again. It's genuinely useful, and it's straight. It's a straight line that dead ends with human memory, right? The right side is the same engine with two things that are changed: a schedule and a permission to act. It senses signals, it decides against rules that you wrote, it takes action, it logs what happened, and it goes around again and again, nobody asking or having to manually prompt these things. And feel free to drop it in the chat, but real quick, what side of your team's most aligned to? I can tell you, prior to Vaughn, we were very much on I'd say the left side, right? We were very manual, very proactive. If we remembered to do something, we did something, but a lot of times, unfortunately, we didn't. So most people start on the left. Here's the thesis for the whole hour, though, so I'll say it clearly. The QA loop makes you faster. The operating loop is what changes what your company is capable of doing and the outcomes that you can provide. And so that gap between fast and capable is what we're going to cover in the next 40 minutes.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
If you just go back to your last slide, when you talk about the loops, I'm assuming that started with alignment on or something came up where it's like, hey, we're trying to meet this objective, and then how do we do it in a better way? Or could you just talk a little bit about the transition between the two?
Absolutely. That's actually what we're going to go into. So I can answer that now, but we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more. But actually, let's just move on real quick, because we will touch on that. So I'll come back to that. But it was mainly around asking the simple questions of what are the manual things that absolutely have to be done for the business? What are the things that are high impact, low lift? And so I don't want to go into it too much, but we'll definitely talk about some examples and the outcomes that we drove and why we made those decisions for sure. Cool. All right. So 1 minute of the architecture, because the picture does the work. Vaughn for us is the reasoning layer that sits over all of our systems. So Salesforce, Gong, Slack, HubSpot, Pylon, Google Calendars, intent data, et cetera, et cetera. Those little mint dots on the spokes, that's data flowing both directions, just to be clear, not singular. So the three properties that make everything else in this deck possible: it reads everything at once, right? So CRM, calls, tickets, threads, all in a single pass, not one tab at a time. It writes back to tasks, fields, messages, outreach that land in the system where work actually happens. And it runs on a schedule, not, again, when someone remembers to ask. And pay attention to who runs on it. So literally everyone in our org, whether it's marketing, sales, RevOps, CS, product, the exec team. This stopped being a sales tool the week our executives started with their morning briefs. And of course, your spokes might look different than ours. The hub and the spoke is just the point, not our particular logos, but just more so to how we're centralizing everything under this singular reasoning engine. So these 5 principles, in plain English, everything we built rides on these 5 decisions. So 1, push, don't pull. Insights find people on a schedule. Nobody hunts for dashboards or reports. 2, multiply the team that you have. Capacity comes from deleting invisible work, not adding headcount. 3, let buying signals set the agenda, whether that's pre or post sales. A propensity model decides where human hours go, not vague memory, not the loudest deal or what feels right. 4, every insight ends in action. Workflows terminate in a task, a message, or an outreach, never in just a report or a data point. And 5, set it and then govern it. Build it again in minutes and under an hour, run it forever, and let your job shift to owning the quality bar. So that's essentially the whole framework. Everything from here is evidence. So let's dive in. Cool. So principle 1, in a sentence, we reverse the direction of analytics, right? So this goes to the question I think you just asked. But when we started thinking about what is some of the most important things we can leverage this for, and how did we make this decision, one of the very first things that came up, and Tony on my team is on the call here, is we just decided people need to have a better sense and be brought along with how the business is performing on a more continuous basis and not wait for readouts, right? Reports travel to people. People never travel to reports. And here's why. So leadership, again, shouldn't have to wait days, weeks, or even months or open a dashboard to try to navigate to the right metric to know how their business is moving. So what we set up instead is Vaughn drips one short themed narrative update into Slack every weekday, small enough to read between meetings, written as a story, not a data dump, because a monthly readout gets skimmed, a 2-minute drip gets read and acted on. Three of the flagships are on the side, but we obviously have many more. So just as like an idea or like an outline, Tuesday is like our funnel trend report. The conversion chain and yes, sellers converting below the baseline do get named. While that might sound spicy, we're just very direct because our goal is to be honest about how our business is performing and then work to impact change, not just call people out. Accountability is a feature. So then Wednesday is our automated forecast briefs, trend and pacing against the landing zone. So a miss surfaces in week 2, not week 12. Friday is our pipeline management. Every deal that progressed, slipped, grew, shrank, or redated with a Y attached. And all of this, again, is just more proactive. It was very common for, pipeline updates or, top of funnel performance to be brought up in a monthly recurring meeting or a QBR. And again, at that point, it's just way too late to act and drive an outcome for that quarter. And so the payoff is the line at the bottom is real. So like a good example would be literally like we had a failing demo page conversion rate that got caught in like week 3, and then a Tuesday drip fixed it the same week. And so we recreated our demo page to be more proactive about trying to secure the meetings up front. And we found that obviously yielded a much higher outcome in conversion. And so this is just a great example of like, that's a very, very important metric that most people just won't proactively look at just because there's a million other things going on in the business. And so what you really want to do is set up these systems to index on those highly important metrics that you don't want to spend your time spending an hour trying to over-index on, but that just gives you a theme readout. So you can just take a quick pulse look, cool, is this trending positively or upward, or are we seeing a downward shift? If so, we know we need to go take action.
Chris, do you send these over email or over Slack?
We do it over Slack. I'll show some examples of exactly how we do it. We've just found that Slack is absolutely the most effective place to communicate things. It's where everyone in our business lives out of. I personally, if you asked me 10 years ago, I'd say I'd send like probably 30 emails a day. Now I probably send 1 or 2 because it's just so inundated with, people trying to sell to me and things just get lost. But it's much easier to just collaborate and provide these updates on Slack. And people are always checking Slack throughout the entire day. Email we found to just be much more, stale is not the right word, but I'd say like most people might check their email maybe 6 or 7 times a day. Everyone's checking Slack every like 20 minutes.
And do you still review these before they go out, let's say for the exec team, or is automated now at a point where you are not involved in the output?
Yeah, so usually what we do is for the first 2 or 3 weeks, every single day we'll review the data just to make sure everything is clean and that there's no inconsistencies. Once we feel confident that the rhythm is running and that it's consistently pulling the most accurate data, then we don't review it every day. We do pulse checks about 2 times a week from the team, where they'll just randomly check the data sets to make sure everything's clean. And like, yeah, again, we've found the variability to be less than like 0.5%. And we found that just a little hack for everyone, that if you want to index, especially on like Salesforce or HubSpot reports, build the reports in Salesforce directly. Tell Vaughn to go index on those specific reports. Don't have Vaughn go index on the general narrative. So for example, if you want it to index on like meetings or pipeline, build the exact reports you want in the exact way you want them, and then tell Vaughn to go look at those exact reports. The variability of like failure is insanely low. I think it may be like 1 out of, I don't know, like 300 or 400 queries versus like any AI will not always be 100% accurate, right? When you query a general term.
And can you answer
Go ahead.
John's question? I think John was asking, like, do you have a central channel or they each go to a different channel?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that a little bit more. But so we have like morning briefings and evening briefings for our CSMs and our AEs. They do have separate channels just for them. This allows them to have a channel that's not, not inundated with a bunch of other Slack messages and notes and everything like that. It's just a singular channel that they can look at every day that has the narratives, the metrics that are most important to them. And it's a clean channel that they know they can always go to just like reference all of that information. So we split them out as separate ops channels. And then of course we do have like direct DMs that we send to executives or different team members, depending on the metrics that we're sharing. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's an example of what like a full week would look like. Our nervous system essentially on one slide. So and you'll notice one thing, like there's no meetings here, right? This is not a meeting situation. So every morning, game day briefings go out. Every evening roundups go out. These serve, those two serve the front lines. They're what the whole next principle is going to be based off of. The amber row is the leadership drip. A different theme each day. Again, Monday opens with a week of demand gen weekly, how top of funnel performed last week, a trend analysis, Tuesday funnel conversions, Wednesday automated forecast, Friday pipeline movement. Thursday is empty on purpose, right? A daily drip really only works if it doesn't become wallpaper, right? So one free day keeps the rhythm scarce enough to where people actually read it and engage, and you just kind of build that muscle memory that they anticipate to get this information or this narrative at the beginning of their day, and it kind of just becomes like part of their operating rhythm. And the blue strip that you see every week, target accounts that are spotted, for example, on our website become relationship briefs that are pushed to the exec teams. And this is where it gets kind of fun. So like a real world example would be, about a month ago or so, we had a visitor brief that would flag a target account that was browsing our site. An exec was reading it, the thread, and realized, hey, I actually know the CFO at this company. The warm intro went out the same day. We had a qualified meeting the next week. Now you think about that chain, like Vaughn noticed the visit, matched it to an account list, wrote the brief, pushed it to the people with the relationship. The only human step in that entire chain was just a handshake. And that would have been, a motion that like we probably would have gone completely unengaged or unnoticed without that proactive measure. So software created the luck, the human supplied the handshake, which is exactly the step you want humans doing. Cool. Moving on to principle 2. So our AEs and CSMs, again, like I said, they didn't get faster or significantly better. They just stopped spending hours rebuilding context that our 4 systems already held. So here's the uncomfortable truth about GTM, right? The most expensive hours are the ones where people are spending reconstructing what already happened, right? Like scrolling through old notes, rereading threads, replaying calls over and over again. And multiply that across every meeting, every rep, every day. That's where your team's capacity is actually going. Right. So we built a few different workflows to augment this. Like I said before, at first, 7 a.m., game day briefings go out for every meeting on today's calendar. Vaughn reads Pylon records, our calendars, Salesforce history, most recent Gong calls, Slack threads, and then delivers the context of those open items and what to leave the room with. At 6 p.m., the roundup goes out, a few sentence synopsis per meeting of every spoken follow-up and auto-created task for sales in Salesforce as well as Pylon. Tomorrow's to-do list waiting at login. So every morning they just they wake up, they see their daily briefings, and they see the list of things that they need to accomplish. And the numbers underneath it, the 22% miss rate, now being under 1 is like where you see the high value outcomes. I'm sorry, someone say something?
Yeah. Was broken?
Oh, I think Jason might not be muted, but
I think Jason, you might want to go to mute. Okay, thanks. Something was broken, so might fix it.
Anyways, so yeah, so this is like this is the cheapest type of capacity that you will ever buy, is like providing this, because again, like they don't have to spend the time to try to memorize every engagement and account. We have like our AEs on average are working anywhere from 15 to 20 opportunities at one time. CSMs are managing 50 plus accounts. It's almost impossible to have full proper context of everything for all of those engagements. And so it's just easy for them to wake up, not have to worry about that, get this synopsis, and let's actually take a look at what that looks like. So here's like a view of what it actually could look like. So what it actually looks like. So a live brief with the account details, generalized again. This one is specific for the CSMs, but the most important thing is you have the context, the open items, the things to watch out for, and the things that you want to leave with. And it calls out the specific areas that they want that you need to like be aware of or engage. So context, pricing came up twice on the last call. They're sensitive to the sentiment is positive, but the CFO hasn't joined the conversation yet. Renewals coming up. This is a concern. There's open items for SSO tickets that were recently closed. We need to confirm that they fixed those, and not like last month's a sticking point has been resolved, right? So it just really gives them a prompt where they don't really have to do any thinking. They can just get this high level understanding of what they need to index on and focus on. And then it just becomes a very fluid motion. And this is crucial because I'm sure like most of you, our AEs and our CSMs, they're in back-to-back meetings, right? So they literally have maybe 1 or 2 minutes to prep for the next meeting. And this is really the only highly effective way to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to gong calls where...
Sean, I mean, my computer's...
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I just can't tell you how many times I've listened to gong calls where they spend the first 5 or 10 minutes just aligning on what they spoke about last time, which one, it just doesn't look like we're very prepared. But unfortunately, it's just kind of the nature of running a business where you have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of customers that you have to manage. So the last line is the design detail everyone steals. So every meeting arrives with the definition of done. So that call gets judged by what it moved, not how it felt, right? And on the right side is the why it works, right? 4 systems assembled into one read before the CSM's first coffee, written as a story, 90 seconds. The reading replaces the 45 minutes of trying to like do all the review. I'll give you a few real world examples of what this looks like. Obviously, I couldn't use our real proprietary data, but this is a version. So you can see exactly like it's just a very clean, aesthetically like viewable Slack message. You get the TLDR in the Slack, and then you actually have a link to the full briefing. This is an example of what one of those briefings looks like. Once again, it's very, very simple. This CSM can click on any of the meetings she has that day, walk in knowing what she needs to address, and what she needs to be aware of or concerned about. It also gives them a synopsis of what happened in the prior calls and when those calls occurred. It tells her about any open tickets related to the customer that she needs to be aware of, or any negative sentiment from prior calls. And it gives her a proposed agenda and talking points to focus on, as well as what she needs to take away from that meeting. And of course, it gives a holistic overview of the commercial position. And so again, very simple, easy to digest, and gives her all of the information she needs for this meeting. Very similarly, this is what an evening digest would look like. So it, again, categorizes the conversation, it reviews the calls from the day, shows you the outcomes from those calls, who attended, any updated MEDPIC criteria specifically for the sellers, because this is a seller one. It also tells them about the specific risks and signals that they might not have garnered during that call. It gives a more holistic overview of all of the call notes. So again, this is the abridged version for the outcomes. This is a more holistic view. And then it auto creates the follow-up tasks of things that were talked about on that call. So in this scenario, you need to schedule another demo with the Rivian team. And then we need to send the delete act brief to our point of contact. And you'll notice that these, if you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, these link to Salesforce tasks directly. So this is how we keep them accountable. They log into their Salesforce dashboard or their Pylon dashboard. They see the tasks they need to just work down that next day, and then they check them off. That's also how we keep them accountable to make sure that they're moving the conversation forward and not letting anything slip. Cool. All right. So let's move on to principle 3. And this is yeah, go ahead.
I think one Steve had a question that how did you create the artifact? Like, is it per rep? And then after that, I think Sonia has her hands up.
Yeah. So the artifact. So these are Vaughn artifacts. So you can see that here. These are based off of we created pretty extensive markdown files in a command. By the way, I would recommend, if you use commands, like try not to. I personally have found it to be more effective to create a markdown file separately that I upload into a command, and then just have the command review and read and act on that markdown file, versus actually trying to put the entire command in that markdown file. But yeah, so these get auto-generated, they are auto-shared and pushed live and then linked into the Slack message, which is also part of that command and markdown file. And yes, it is per rep. Each command is per rep. Sorry, did you say there was another question?
Did that require like different requirement gathering per rep, or like did you guys align with like the head of CS and sales on here's what each of the team members needs and based on their book of business, or?
Yeah, so we did start with a baseline that we aligned with the leaders on. Of course, certain sellers or certain CSMs just had some, feedback tweaks for us of like how they wanted to visualize things, or maybe some other narratives or notes that they just wanted to have as part of their specific briefing. So there's a little bit of variability, but I'd say probably 95% are pretty much the same.
One call out here, just underscoring what Chris mentioned, is the action items. They create those in Salesforce or Pylon based on who the person is. So then the person is expected to check them off next day. So that is how they track like if the action item was done or not. And
Exactly.
that's why Chris went from 22% action items not done to 1%, and that's how the tracking happens. But I think that's super cool. It's big brothery, but each company does things differently. Sonia,
Yeah, I guess that kind of answered my question, because I was wondering why you create the tasks in Salesforce rather than just potentially draft an email directly from Vaughn connected to your Gmail. That, I'm seeing how like my end of day is, okay, follow up with these customers based on the conversations you had, here's the draft, and then they review and send. And I thought that would be kind of fast. I kind of prefer my reps not being in Salesforce much, but I guess if it is for tracking, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, so funny enough, even the Sahil's comment, this was something that our CSMs are actually like really receptive to and asked for, because they just realized like, look, we aren't confident that we're going to be able to remember every single thing. And the problem is, if you put it in a static document, like something in Google Drive or an email, right, you have to remember to go back and reference that. And there's no way to validate which one of those things unless you start crossing stuff off the list, which in my opinion is a little archaic. It's just not as effective. One of the great things that we can also do is we have Bond trigger off of tasks that are like behind or not due, or like are overdue. And right, we'll even say things like, hey Jeremy, you have a 90-minute block in the next 2 hours. You have these 3 overdue tasks. Why don't you knock these out at that time? And it really helps them kind of like calendar block and prioritize their workflow in their day, because sometimes it's just a little too overwhelming. So we found that like, yeah, sometimes it does get annoying, but like you have to hold people accountable, and that's just like part of the business. But much more importantly, like it just really helps them kind of schedule and like align their day, and then remind them like, hey, I have this block, I can go do these things now while I have this break. And just it forces them to stay like keep these things top of mind. And so like, yeah, we've just seen like a much more productive output because of it. Do you have incomplete overdue tasks if it can see the rep completed it but didn't mark it complete? Well, for example, like if are you saying that like if they actually, let's say a follow-up is like they need to send something to a customer, they did it, Vaughn can index obviously on that email today. We don't do that level of validation. We just say, hey, was this completed? And usually it's as simple as the rep can check that off specifically from Slack directly, or they can go into the system of record. But it's not difficult for them. It takes them literally 2 seconds to be like, yep, this was done, check it off, and then move on. Hopefully that answered your question.
the third principle is my favorite use case, by the way.
All right, let's get into it. So yeah, so this is the machine behind the efficiency of our AE and our CSM org, and that like kind of 5 to 7 minute number that I spoke about earlier. So left to right, signal in, score out, action fired, right? So on the left, 40 plus live signals that we index on. The 6 on the screen are just picked to show the range, right? So target accounts that hit the website, champion changes company, real email engagement, the value, high value privacy buying intent, since that's the space we're in, G2 views of us versus our competitors, product usage thresholds are crossed, people moving, web behavior, buying research, all in one stream. At the center, each one of these signals gets weighted into a living score per account. That ring says like 92, but two design details worth noting. First, signals decay, right? So pricing page visits, for example, that happen in March mean nothing in August. And the score knows that. So second, it's alive, right? So it reweights as new signals arrive and fade. It's never a quarterly refresh. This is how we keep things like as clean and as accurate as possible. And yes, the amber box, the weighting is our secret sauce. So it stays home, but I'm happy to talk about some of the things we index on and like how our model works at a holistic level. The architecture is what travels, and the architecture is what like you should consider copying. But whether you're using it for outbounding or prioritizing accounts to go after, which we do now, like we don't boil the ocean. We used to go after 10,000 plus accounts. Now we focus on the 300 to 400 accounts that are in active buying motions. And I can tell you that when we create an opportunity, around 40% of the time we win that opportunity because we use propensity model signals like this. And it's much easier to convince someone to evaluate our business or our solution and our software versus trying to convince someone to start a new initiative within their business if they don't have something already in motion. And then, sorry, on the right, when the score crosses a threshold, it doesn't just sit in a dashboard. Within minutes, one of three things happen. Either the AE or CSM gets alerted with the full story attached, plain text outreach goes out in the seller's voice, or a relationship brief gets routed for a warm executive introduction. Obviously, we have a bunch more next best actions. These are just some high-level ones that I listed here. The strip at the bottom, so 7 days to the first working models. That's all it really took. It is an iterative process, of course. We didn't get it right the first time. So one of the great things, though, is you can ask Vaughn to synthesize these data sets and understand why was this signal X when we know this output should have been Y. It does a really, really good job kind of helping dissect and helping you improve these models, which is awesome. So again, this is not a data science initiative with a steering committee, right? It prompts with weights. And we found this to be just incredibly accurate and effective at just helping our CSMs and our AEs prioritize their times, whether it's engaging with specific customer accounts because there are signals of concern, or AEs to go focus on a new prospect because they have a high sense of urgency. Cool. So here's what the model actually changes. So not for pipeline, for human beings, right? So on the left side, how most operators, I'm sure on this call, myself included, build their day before the propensity model. Alphabetical sweeps, who emailed most recently, what's the loudest deal in Slack, gut feel on renewal risk. No shame in it. Without a model, instinct and recency is pretty much all you have. But the best operators are just great guessers, in my opinion, and that's kind of like your ceiling, right? So on the right side, you see the same operator this morning, a ranked queue. Obviously, we couldn't use our real data, but the narratives behind these and the scoring is real. It's just the names aren't real, but 92% because the champion changed the job, right? And they're now back on our pricing page, and they're engaging, looking at us versus our competitor on LinkedIn. I won't go through every single one, but you can see how there's these different scoring weights. There's these different high value narratives that we associate with these scores, and then that obviously dictates the action. So every rank comes with its why, readable in 5 seconds, and the queue rebuilds itself as signals arrive and decay every single day. And you'll notice what didn't disappear, the human judgment part, right? So it just moved. So out of building the queue and into working the conversations, which is the part humans are obviously really great at. So same people, same 40 hours. The business's own data allocates their attention. Every day starts already pointed at the highest value work that they should be focusing on.
Does that live in an artifact, where the team will review artifacts for this stuff, or is this reports with a ICP or an intent score that you guys have created in HubSpot, or how do you guys do that?
Where our actual propensity model lives?
Well, how you would action, you're showing us the slide, but is there an artifact that sales leaders or CS leaders would be in that are ranking, those renewal risk opportunities, for example, or the high intent sales targets and prospects that we're going to go after? How do you guys, how do you operationalize it? I guess that's maybe the better question.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 3 main ways. So one, sometimes if it's like, let's say just a new account is spiking, and we might like, sometimes it'll just ping the AE directly and say like, hey, here's an account that you need to go after. Here's a narrative. Here's who you need to target. That will be more of a DM. We, of course, do have dashboards that sit in Vaughn that update based off of these propensity models on the CS side, as well as the individual seller side. And then we do have, as well as like artifacts for weekly readouts as well. Yeah. So it kind of lives in three places. It just depends on the use case. But I'd say the most common one is either direct pings or updating a dashboard specific to the CSM or the seller. Cool. Cool. One more thing the model buys you, by the way, so is time. Because again, interest does not wait politely, right? These Vaughn triggered outreaches land, like I said, in 5 to 7 minutes while they're still thinking about us, while we're still top of mind. Like even a really fast human team, I don't know about everyone else here, but our SDRs, right? Like sometimes it would be hours, sometimes unfortunately days. And at that point, the moment has cooled and you're now like focused on like trying to re-earn their attention. And so before that model, honestly, most of these signals were never seen at all. And so the bar isn't slower, it was like never. And so the best message in the world, if I could leave you with anything, the best message in the world will always lose to a decent one that arrives while the topic is still top of mind. So it is much more important to engage and have that action happen within 5 to 7 minutes of someone taking an action or showing interest versus trying to like really refine that model or like refine that messaging and try to have the perfect output, like outbound or message to this individual, which is why the model doesn't just score, it acts. So, and that's moving on to principle 4. So our rule for every build is that the workflow must terminate in a system write, like in a system write or a human handoff, and never in just a report. And so for examples, and watch the little pills on the corners too. They'll tell you where every arrow lands, but a follow-up is spoken on a call. A task exists in Salesforce and Pylon, right, before the next morning. Friction keeps surfacing on a call. It's themed, counted, and routed to product with evidence attached, right? This could be something like customers saying that, hey, we really wish you had this kind of feature set, or in competitive bake-offs, we might lose to a specific competitor because they have a feature set or something that they can solve for that we can't. And so a lot of times it's really inconsistent to aggregate this type of high-value information and provide it back to your product or engineering team. But Vaughn can automate that process and provides weekly drips. Obviously, when there is relevant information, we don't want to just spam them unnecessarily, but it provides them weekly drips with points of action to say like, hey, if we invest in these products, here are 4 or 5 different potential prospects or customers or revenue that we can go secure because of this investment. And it becomes a cost benefit conversation for them versus just like, well, it's just sales or CS asking for another feature set. So my favorite one to say out loud, though, is a commitment spoken at like 2 p.m. is a task in the system of record by 7 a.m. and no one has to type anything. Again, this just helps keep everyone accountable, have the same level of visibility. Again, if a workflow ends in a dashboard, it isn't finished. Dashboards are where insights go to wait, right? This is all about proactive and prescriptive insights and actions on those insights, which raises an obvious question. If this all fires on its own, who watches it? So principle 5 is the trust principle, and it's the reason that the other 4 are safe to turn on and run. So first, the shift. You build once. Every workflow in this deck, like I said, took under an hour outside of our holistic propensity model. That took about a week, a little bit longer. And so it runs every day after that, mornings, evenings, weekends, quarter end. And the team's job changes shape from producing the work to owning the quality bar, right? So frame that honestly with your team, and like you'd be surprised like how effective and what type of a response you get. And it's the only version of this that scales, right? So if you look at the little bars, 45 minutes to build once, minutes each week to govern, right? So that ratio is the entire business case, right? When I say that, like when someone asked earlier, like, do we validate our data? Absolutely. Like we still look at the morning briefings that go out. We make sure that calls on the calendar, actual Google Calendar, aren't missed. But honestly, to do it for all of our CSMs takes, I don't know, less than 5 or 10 minutes. So that cost of value is really high, and that keeps us honest, and it makes us feel confident, as well as our CS team feel confident that what they're getting isn't something that has to be double checked or confirmed. Sorry, think there was a question here. How do you have Vaughn looking for all of these things that might happen at any minute of the day to trigger with a team member within 5 to 7 minutes? What features in Vaughn are you leveraging for the consistent listening? Okay, so look, this is where you're going to have to like index yourself, right? So there's, I'd say, and keep me honest here, Tony, but there's probably like 15 to 20 core metrics or insights that we want to like proactively measure and model on. So a good example is when someone visits your website that's on your target account list, right? So you can have something like our B2B, which does de-anonymization, right? There's a few different solutions that do it. Vector does it as well. And so when someone hits the website, our B2B or Vector will identify that account. You can have a workflow that immediately then matches that account against your target account list or accounts that your sellers are trying to go after. If there is a Boolean match, it then triggers a Vaughn workflow to either go notify the seller or automatically create an outbound email in that seller's kind of theme, as in like their style of voice, with relevant information, because obviously we have the backend data of that account on what their use cases are like, customers or case studies that are similar to those type of companies, where we've solved pain points for those type of businesses. If there's a specific product page or use case page that they're indexing on, then obviously we have tokenized predefined content that it can build off of. So there's like a lot of different variables and resources. And I will say like that's something that's going to have to start slow. But what you really want to identify is like in this type of use case or scenarios, like what are the 5 or 6 pain points or use cases you solve for? Who are the personas you target? And then you should have a general narrative of like a first call or engagement with those type of businesses, pain points, or personas that you're engaging with. Again, keep me honest here, Tony, but I think we have something like 6 main personas and probably, like 6 or 7 different tracks, depending on their use case or pain point. And it did take some time to build, but it's one of those things where, you do the upfront work. It's a little bit of iteration every quarter based off of engagement and how people respond, but it's kind of set it and forget it and just look at the performance. But it's, again, like I said, it's not so much about, are we getting the messaging right? It's just, are we saying something that's relatively reasonable or like relatively similar to the pain point they're trying to solve? Can we resonate with them at a high level right when they're most interested in engaging with us, which is, like I said, within that 5 to 7 minute window. So you do have to think about the use cases that you want to solve for, right? Like you're not going to be able, well, maybe you can, but like we didn't use Vaughn to say like, hey, look at our business and tell us everything we should index on. We had to be a little bit more proactive to say, here are the things that we want to measure on. And every week our team has new ideas and we build new workflows. And so it kind of just compounds over time. But yeah, you're not going to be able to most likely build all of this in day one. Sorry, go ahead.
Chris, sorry. I guess what I'm asking you is how do you have Vaughn from a technical perspective actually constantly listening for something to change from, where it is now to the state you're looking for? I understand identifying the limited set, but, schedule like commands, I believe, and someone can keep me honest, can't run constantly. They can run maybe daily or hourly. So how do you have it actually looking for something to flip so that you can fire that slack or kick off the workflow?
I mean, but you can trigger things, right? So depending on the integration that you have with whatever product, but like, for example, if it's in HubSpot, you can have it trigger an event. I mean, I think the tasks, one of the tasks we have, keep me honest here, Sahil, but I think you can run them every half an hour. I think that's what we have it set at. I'd have to like confirm that, but sorry, go
I
ahead.
think, you're using schedule commands. And Jason, you're right, we don't have trigger events today. Again, trigger events are part of our workflow builder or agent builder that we are releasing end of October. But I think right now these are running on a schedule.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Where was I on this? Cool. Oh yeah. So this principle 5 about like governing and making sure that the data quality is there. So like I said, you do have to spend some time, of course, like validating the data. You should always do that when it comes to AI. Nothing is absolute, but the time to govern these things, if you set it up properly, is, you're talking about maybe a few minutes a day collectively not more than an hour a week. And the cost to outcome there for us is incredibly fruitful. So these are essentially the 4 rules to focus on. So spot check on a rota, right? A named human reviews the sample of outputs every single week. Trust is earned per workflow, never granted to the platform. 2, every claim cites its evidence, the call, the record, the thread. If Vaughn can't point to the source, it doesn't ship. 3, disagreement is a signal. So when Vaughn or a human read the same account differently or the same narrative differently, we investigate. It pings us. We do the like kind of like the holistic review. We never auto trust one side or another. That gap is where the learning lives, right? And then 4, prompts our code, right? So versioned, reviewed, improved with an owner, a change log, and a rollback. So if you only take like one thing away from here, I'd really index on like number 3. But the bottom line is literally everything you've seen today runs unattended. Monitoring it, like I said, takes minutes, less than an hour a week. And that monitoring is now like the main job. And that frees my team up to go focus on new ideas and work on other things for the business. Cool. All right, don't worry, we're getting close to the end here. But now everything so far we've talked about has like really been GTM flavored. So what happens when you take these same 5 principles that hit new surfaces? So these 6 workflows, these are 6 new workflows that we started building out, none of which needed a new platform. Everyone started as a prompt again against the systems we already had. So customer health, we now have scored nightly. This runs in Vaughn. 14 signals across adoption, relationship, experience, and value, recomputed every night. And my favorite design rule is we've ever written is when the human read and the machine read disagree, the worst one wins, right? Until someone investigates. So pessimism is a safety feature for us. Another example is the forecast that arrived pre-filled. So Vaughn drafts the renewal forecast from health, from usage, from calls, CSMs confirm or dispute. The forecast call becomes a review meeting instead of an assembly line. I won't go through every single one here, but one more, actually 2 other that I'll touch on is the outbound that runs itself. So we do a weekly scan of every propensity signal. We pick the 15 to 20 accounts that have the highest. We validate the context. We then write and sends a 2-week cadence in the seller's voice, almost like an outbound nurture, but it's all plain text. And a full motion end-to-end governed like anything else. And then the last one that we're rolling out this week is the executive voice briefed by the field. So a bi-weekly brief distills what buyers are actually asking on calls into topics that our CEO or executive content should own next. The field tells the CEO or executives what to write about, what to engage with, what's important. And that one always like gets a pretty positive reaction. So most of these are in production today. A few of them are just kind of like rounding out, but again, all of them running on the exact loop you just saw previously. Cool. All right, just 2 more slides. But here's why this is all compounds, right? So you walk this wheel with me clockwise from the top. Signals feed briefings, briefings drive actions, actions produce outcomes, outcomes generate cleaner data, which sharpens the signals. And Vaughn sits at the hub because it's the same reasoning layer doing every step, right? So this isn't theoretical, right? Our briefings got better the week the propensity signals started flowing into them. The propensity model gets better because everything rounds up, keeps the CRM honest. Every workflow you add makes the previous one smarter, which is why, 350, 400K isn't just a spike. It's like a baseline that will keep growing. It allows us to be much more precise and drive much higher outcomes with less resources. So each turn of the wheel makes the next one cheaper, essentially. And no one asked the question, but let me answer the sharp question before someone does ask, which is like, you look at something like the 90% or the 350,000, how can these both be true? One is directly attributed to the Vaughn run plays. The 90% is the share of new revenue whose motion the propensity layer shapes. So attribution and influence are kept separate on purpose. The day you kind of blur those things, like nobody trusts your numbers. But what we care about is not trying to attribute more data and more high value outcomes, right? We are very honest and we hold ourselves to a high standard of accountability as well. We don't build things just to like look good and say, hey, we built this cool workflow. It has to drive high value outcomes or it gets stripped and we figure out something else to invest in, or we figure out a way to repurpose it or redesign it. And last 2 slides. So again, when you get started, like I've heard a lot of people in the Vaughn channel and conversations. It's like, all right, well, where do we get started? Like, it just seems like so much that has to be done. But like, we started very simple and we started step by step. And again, you're looking at these outcomes are something that we built. I mean, to be fair, we built it over many, many months. They didn't take us long to build, but they took us a lot of time to like refine and make sure we got it right to the point where they can run completely autonomously with very, very high trust from the business. So like, you start with like under an hour a week and climbing one step at a time. So week one, make a report that pushes out. Take a report that leadership always asks you for, schedule it, create a Slack narrative, story tell it versus just the data readout. So there's no misconstruing the message that you're trying to get across, right? This is something that's like super, super low lift, really high value for like every executive that we've done this with, like absolutely loves it. Week two, build those morning briefs, right? Start with one or two team members, use them as like kind of a guinea pig, get their feedback, iterate, roll it out to your more holistic team, a couple weeks after that. I won't go step by step, but you can just see how this like starts to compound really quickly. And then you'll start getting, other people and members of the team giving you ideas and providing you feedback. Like we have a lot of CSMs who are like, hey, we would love this. And like, here's the first version of this, this Vaughn command I created for, synthesizing competitive dispositioning. So for example, when we know, like actually a really good example of one is like one of our CSMs told us like, it'd be really cool if we saw that when someone new gets added to a customer account and added into our platform or our backend database, we look at their LinkedIn and we see, did that person come from our competitive solution? And are they going to be a detractor for our business, right? And that was just a really cool idea that they had where they told us like, it'd be great to see this. And we built that. And you'll start to see that your team will like help you along the way of how to craft these things. And it's not just going to be on yourself, but this is where like how you can just slowly get started and progress. But I'd say like within a month, you could have a ton of really high value like automations firing that are just significantly augmenting your business, not just from a time perspective, but also from a like what should we focus on and spend our resources on perspective, which is always going to be super high value. So I'll kind of end it here and leave it with just like, these are probably like, where does your team sit today? These are the questions you should really like focus on asking yourself. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to chat. Thank you all for the time. It was fun doing this. My DMs are always open. You can find me in the Vaughn channel. So anyone who wants to trade prompts or has more ideas or wants to index on anything that we're building, these are again some very high level things. So we have a lot more like pretty intense use cases and things that we're doing with Vaughn that are pretty cool. But I would say things like propensity model and health scoring, proactive analytics, and briefings, not just for your CSM and your AE teams, but also your executives will significantly augment how your business operates, as well as like your executives' perception of what you can do for the business. So cool. I appreciate the time. And any other questions?
Yeah,
Chris,
oh, go ahead, Sahil.
I was saying the same thing. Chris, Sonia had something. Yeah.
I can come off mute. I was just curious to see if your AEs are able to handle more opportunities. Normally, if I guess, I mean, the idea for me having Vaughn is also that a lot of tasks, a lot of things that were hard to manage, remember, and being, on. Now it's like being suggested to be made much easier. So I'm trying to understand, we can increase the pipeline. Can they handle more opportunities? Have you tried anything like this or not yet?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I would say prior to Vaughn, I'd say like our AEs would comfortably handle, 10 to 12 active opportunities at once. Not because that was the inbound volume. It was significantly more than that, but just because we saw sloppiness and a lot of like just missed engagements and follow-ups happen once you kind of went beyond that, especially at the enterprise level. But after putting a lot of these motions in, I would say that they very easily handle, I'd say 15 to 20, some AEs 20, 25 plus. The two areas that I've seen it being most effective that just never, like we literally never got these from the AEs before is one, proactive outreach to upsell, cross-sell of their customer base. They almost never ever did that, but with more signals, insights, and since we're in the privacy space, laws that were applicable to the customer accounts that they weren't considering and the use cases that we were not solving for them with the products they had not purchased. sellers are now responsible for, I'd say, about 30% of our pipeline being sourced by upsell triggers that come from, these type of signals. We are definitely seeing some improvement from outbound as well, but at this time they're spending a lot more time mining the current customer base in the upsell motion because it's so lucrative for them. But absolutely.
Hey, so we're running out of time to ask questions here unless some of you have time to stick around. So I'm going to suggest that we take any additional questions over to the Vaughn Best Practices channel. Like Chris, I see you have a question. I'm going to take that and put it over there. Although Chris Wright, Chris Cooley, Brian, if all of you have time to stick around, I won't end this Zoom, but please know that if you do need to go, we can move the conversation over there.
Sure, I'm happy to answer it. So we did start using Vaughn about I'd say 6 months ago. That's when we got access to it. I would say when we were effectively using it, I don't know, you tell me, Tony, I think it was probably maybe 2.5, 3 months ago. So a lot of it, I'd say up until about 3 months ago, was my RevOps go-to-market teams using it for own purposes, garnering insights, and then so we were doing the first part of that cycle. We were using it for insights and understanding the narratives. We were not using it for automated actions and feedback loops. That second part, I would say, didn't really start occurring until probably closer to the beginning of June. But yeah, that's really when I'd say we significantly augmented our workflows with Vaughn.
Okay, thanks. We're about a month in, so I want to compare myself to a reasonable standard and not just be like, why am I not doing this all already?
I mean, to be fair, like, yeah, look, we trial and failed a lot at the beginning. And so I would say, like, if there's use cases that you guys are interested in, I'm happy to kind of give you like our like holistic architectures and outlines and just like some of the pitfalls you want to avoid, or some of the fundamental things you need to build out in like org memory or user memory in Vaughn. So these things can be highly effective and run pretty quick. So I just want to say, like, it's not going to take 6 months for you to see these things or get these things live or see mass value. If knowing what I know now, we probably could have done it in like 4 to 6 weeks and got to the same state of where we were. It just took months and months of trial and error. Yes, the presentation is recorded and will be shared, I believe. Oh, she already said that. Sorry.
I just didn't want to commit until you confirmed that you were comfortable.
Absolutely. I'm curious on, okay, so Brian's question. I'm curious how you weigh what you can do versus what you should do, or is there a filter of sorts you can use to assess opportunities within Vaughn and goals of minimizing time spending building random things? Okay, this is a great question. We've built a lot of random things. It kind of comes down, at the end of the day, we started in the inverse. Instead of trying to figure out like, these are the things Vaughn can do for us, like what are the cool use cases we should build out, we just removed Vaughn from the discussion. And I sat with my team as well as my leaders and said, okay, let's just name like the top 7 to 10 things that are the biggest friction points in the business. And they were holistic things like, yeah, we just don't know how, we don't have prescriptive insights on analytics, right? Like it's always a readout and a monthly meeting or a bi-monthly meeting, and that's not great. So we need to go solve that problem. Another one was our CS team, like they just have like, we need to keep hiring heads because we don't have enough time to work all these accounts. And they're having a little bit of a difficulty understanding like who should they be engaging with, who should they be prompting for renewal at what time. And so we kind of started with like, what are these big business problems? And then we kind of distilled it down to, okay, can we use Vaughn? And can we architect something that will automate this or solve for this? So I would say like, don't start in Vaughn to try to like figure out what you should invest in. Start with the holistic problems impacting your business and see how you can use this like reasoning engine that's integrated with all your systems to automate those workflows.
Fantastic. Cool. All right. Any other questions that come up? Bring them over to the Vaughn Best Practices channel. We do have another one of these show and tells coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll post the link in the channel as well, so you can RSVP for it and get the link. It's going to be Steve. You can wave, Steve. He's got some really cool things to show. Oh, he might be frozen. Anyway, thank you all for being here. If there's anything else, I'll leave the Zoom open until everybody's gone. But thank you for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.